Hello, Project Uplift Literacy, in their words, my voice. The speech, May 6, 1879. Ferdinand L. Garnet, best known as the husband of anti-lynching crusader Wells-Barnett. However, by 1879, Barnett, a graduate of Chicago College of Law and editor of the Chicago Conservator, the city's first black newspaper, which he founded in 1878, was one of the rising number of post-Reconstruction black leaders. On May 6th through 9th, 1879, at a national conference of African American men meeting in Nashville, Tennessee, where most of the issues discussed related to Southern black poverty and anti-black violence in the region. Barnett, the delegate from Chicago, gave a speech which called for racial unity as a necessary precondition of African American progress. His address specifically called for African Americans to unite both politically and economically, to set aside jealousy and infighting, to assist the poor and support black-owned businesses, which in turn would hire African American workers, and urge the black schools of the South to be staffed by African American teachers, not only to build a middle class, but also because he believed these teachers would be especially committed to education and racial uplift. Far from being unique, Barnett's calls echoed earlier leaders such as Henry Highland Garnet and anticipated future leaders such as Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. And here is his speech. Mr. Chairman and gentlemen of the conference, the subject assigned me is one of great importance. The axioms which teach us of the strength and unity in the certain destruction following close upon the heels of strife and dissension need not be here repeated. Race elevation can only be attained only through race unity. Pious precepts, business integrity, and moral stamina of the most exalted stamp may win the admiration of a noble few, but unless the moral code, by the grandeur of its teaching, actuates every individual and incites us as a race to nobler aspirations and quickens us to the realization of our moral shortcomings, the distinction accorded to the few will avail us nothing. The wealth of the Indies may crown the efforts of fortune's few favored ones. They may receive all the homage wealth it invariably brings, but unless we as a race check the spirit of pomp and display, and by patiently practicing the most rigid economy, secure homes for ourselves and children, to preferment won by a few wealthy ones will prove short-lived and unsatisfactory. We may have our educational lights here and there, and by the brilliancy of their achievements, they may be living witnesses to the falsity of the doctrine of our inherited inferiority. But this alone will not suffice. It is a general enlightenment of the race which must engage our noblest powers. One vicious, ignorant Negro is readily conceded to be a type of all the rest, but a Negro educated and refined is said to be an exception. We must labor to reverse this rule. Education and moral excellence must become general and characteristic, with ignorance and depravity for the exception. Seeing then the necessity of united action and universal wealth, rather than individual brilliancy. We sorrowfully admit that race unity amongst us is a blessing not yet enjoyed, but to be possessed. We are united only in the conditions which degrade and actions which paralyze the efforts of the worthy who labor for the benefit of the multitude. We are a race of leaders, everyone presuming that his neighbor and not himself was decreed to be a follower. Today, if any one of you should go home and announce yourself a candidate for a certain position, the following day would find a dozen men in the field, each well prepared to prove that he alone is capable of attaining and filling that position. Failing to convince the people, he would drop out of the race entirely or do all in his power to jeopardize the interests of a more successful brother. Why this non-fraternal feeling? Why such a spirit of dissension? We attribute it first to lessons taught us in the gone days by those whose security rested in our disunion. If the same spirit of race unity had actuated the Negro, which has always characterized the Indian, this government would have trembled under the blow of that immortal hero John Brown, and the first drop of fratricidal blood would have been shed not at Fort Sumter, but at Harper's Ferry. Another cause may be found in our partial enlightenment. The ignorant man is always narrow-minded in politics, business, or religion. Unfold to him a plan, and if he cannot see some interest resulting to self, however great the resulting good to the multitude, it meets only his partial approbation and falls entirely to secure his active cooperation. The third reason applies not to the unlearned, but to the learned. Too many of our learned men are afflicted with a mental and moral aberration, termed in common parlance, big-headed. Having reached a commendable degree of eminence, they seem to stand and say, "Lord, we thank thee. We are not as our other men are." They view with perfect unconcern the struggles of a worthy brother. They proffer him no aid. They deem it presumption in him to expect it. They may see a needed step but fail to take it. Others may see the necessity and take steps to meet it and call them to aid, but no, they do not lead, they will not follow, and half of their influence for good is sacrificed by an insane jealousy that is a consuming fire in every bosom when in it finds lodgment. A few of our prominent causes which retard race unity having been noticed, let's look for the remedy. First, our natural jealousy must be overcome. The task is no easy one. We must look for the fruits of our labor in the next generation. With us, our thoughts are confirmed. An old slave once lay dying. Friends and relatives were gathered around. The minister sat at the bedside, endeavoring to prepare the soul for the great change. The old man was willing to forgive everyone except a certain particularly obstinate African who had caused them so much injury. But being over-persuaded, he yielded and said, "Well, if I died, I forgive him. But if I lives that dark, it better take care." It is much the same with us. When we die, our natures will change, but while we live, our neighbors must take care. Upon the young generation, our instruction may be effective. They must be taught that in helping one another, they help themselves, and that in the race of life, when a favored one excels and leads the rest, their powers must be employed, not in retarding his progress, but urging him on, inciting others to emulate his example. We dissipate the gloom of ignorance which hangs like a pall over us. In former days, we were trained in ignorance, and many of our distinguished hearers will remember when they dared not be caught cultivating an intimate acquaintance with a spelling book. But the time has passed when the seeker after knowledge is reviled and persecuted. Throughout this country, the public school system largely obtains books without number and papers without price lent their enlightenment, while high schools, colleges, and universities all over our broad domain throw open their inviting doors and say, whomsoever we may come. We must not fail to notice any dereliction of our educated people. They must learn their duty is to elevate their less favored brethren. And this cannot be done while pride and conceit prevent them from entering heartily into the work. A spirit of a missionary zeal must actuate them to go down among the lowly and by word and action say, "Come with me and I will do you good." We must help one another. Our industries must be patronized and our laborers encouraged. There seems to be a natural disinclination on our part to patronize our own workmen. We are easily pleased with the labor of white hands, but when the same is known to be the product of our own skill and energy, we become extremely exacting and hard to please. From colored men, we expect better work, we pay less, and usually take our own good time for payment. We will patronize a colored merchant as long as he will credit us, but when on the verge of bankruptcy, he is obliged to stop the credit system, we pass by him and pay our money to the white rival. For these reasons, our industries are rarely remunerative. We must lay aside these besetting sins and become united in our appreciation and practical encouragement of our own laborers. Our societies should yield their influence to secure colored apprentices in mechanics. By a judicious deposition of their custom, they may place colored apprentices in vocations at present entirely unpracticed by us. Our labor is generally menial. We have heretofore had a monopoly of America's menial occupations. But thanks to a progressive Caucasian element, we no longer suffer from that monopoly. The white man enters vocations here, there to exclusively ours, and we must enter and become proficient in professions here to there exclusively practiced by them. Our communities must be united. By concerted actions, great results can be accomplished. We must not only act upon the defensive, but when necessary, we should take the offensive. We should jealously guard our every interest, public and private. Let us here speak of our schools. They furnish the surest and swiftest means in our power of attaining knowledge, confidence, and respect. There is no satisfactory reason why all of our children who seek instruction should not have full and equal privileges. But law has been so pervaded in many places, north and south, that sanction is given to separate schools, a pernicious system of discrimination which invariably operates to the disadvantage of the colored race. If we are separate, let it be from the turret to the foundation stone. It is unjust to draw the color line in school, and our community should resent the added insult of forcing the colored pupil to receive instruction from the refuse material of white educational institutions. White teachers take colored schools from necessity, not from choice. We expect, of course, those who act from a missionary spirit. White teachers in colored schools are nearly always mentally, morally, or financially bankrupt. And no colored community should tolerate that imposition. High schools and colleges are sending learned colored teachers in the field constantly, and it is manifestly unjust to make them stand idle and see their people taught by those whose only interest lies in securing their monthly compensation in dollars and cents. Again, colored schools thrive better under colored teachers. The St. Louis schools furnish an excellent example. According to the report of the superintendent, Harris, during the past 2 years, the schools have increased under colored teachers more than 50%. And similar results always follow the introduction of colored teachers. In case of mixed schools, our teachers should be eligible to positions they invariably prove equal to their requirements. In Detroit and Chicago, they have been admitted and proved themselves unquestionably capable. In Chicago, their white pupils outnumber the colored ones 10-1, and yet they have met with decided success. Such gratifying results must be won by energetic, united action on the part of interested communities. White people grant us few privileges voluntarily. We must wage continued warfare on our rights, and they will be disregarded and abridged. Mr. President, we might begin to enumerate the rich results of race unity at sunrise and continue to sunset, and half would not be told. On behalf of the people we are here to represent, we ask for some intelligent action of this conference, some organized movement whereby concerted effort may be had by our race all over the land. Let us decide upon some intelligent, united system of operation and go home and engage the time and talent of our constituents in prosperous labor. We are laboring for race elevation, and race unity is the all-important factor in the work. It must be secured at whatever cost. Individual action, however insignificant, becomes powerful when united and exerted in a common channel. Many thousands of years ago, a tiny coral began a reef upon the ocean's bed. Years passed and others came. Their fortunes were united and the structure grew. Generations came and went, and the corals by the million came and died, and each adding his might to the work, till at last the waters of the grand old ocean broke in ripples around their eyeless heads. And now, as the traveler gazes upon the reef, hundreds of miles in extent, he can faintly realize what great results will follow united action. We must labor with full assurance that we will reap our reward in due season. Though deeply submerged by the wave of popular opinion which deems natural inferiority inseparable associated with a black skin, though weighed down by an accursed prejudice that seeks every opportunity to crush us, still we must labor and despair, not patiently, ceaselessly, and unitedly. The time will come when our heads will rise above the troubled waters. Those generations come and go. The result of our labors will yet to be manifest, and an impartial world will accord us that rank among other races which all aspire to, but only the worthy can win. In their words, my voice, Project Uplift Literacy. Have a great day.